All right, hello attendees. You are tuning in to Exploring Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. This webinar will begin shortly in 2 minutes at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have Joe Grabowski and Stephanie Gandulla with us today to bring you this presentation sponsored by Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants and NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. I'm going to turn it over to Joe to introduce us to Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today, and welcome to today's live interaction with NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. As Hannah mentioned, my name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. And I run an organization called Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. So we're going to take just a moment now to talk about that, and then we'll continue on with today's live event. So I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. And we should have it live now. So Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants is an education nonprofit with the goal of inspiring the next generation of scientists and explorers. So we do this with live virtual events and virtual field trips, virtual guest speakers with scientists, explorers, adventurers, and conservationists from all around the world. If you go to the website, exploringbytheseat.com, and scan downwards, you can find some of those events. We're running 3 to 4 of these events live every day for educators, parents, students all across North America. You can join in live via YouTube, or we have camera spots where families and full classrooms can join in live with us. A little example of what's coming up this week. We'll be live at the Toronto Zoo tomorrow, looking at life cycles with the Komodo dragons. We will have astronaut Terry Virts tomorrow as well at 1 o'clock Eastern. And another fun one we have coming up, we'll be going live to the rainforest in Costa Rica, looking at a day in the life of a biological field station. So lots of fun events coming up. Check out exploringbytheseat.com and join us for some of those live events. All right, let's take things back from that screen share. So we are exploring Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary today. It's in northwestern Lake Huron, has claimed over 200 vessels, pristinely preserving these wrecks, making it a very significant site for maritime and cultural heritage. So today we're going to learn a little bit about what it takes to discover these shipwrecks, the ongoing research efforts, iconic shipwreck stories, and the mysteries awaiting discovery in the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. In a few moments, we'll meet Stephanie Gandulla. She's the research coordinator at this National Marine Sanctuary. But before we do that, I want to tell you about a couple things we're doing today. One of them is we are going to have a live poll and live quizzes throughout today's event. So if you check out the chat sidebar, I have just posted a message there under the chat. Let me make sure that's sent. So you go to the Slido website and it'll ask you for an event code. Today's code is Thunder. And you'll see there's a survey open there already. You can start answering some of those questions. And then when Stephanie talks, she's going to ask a couple quiz questions. They're timed questions. We'll see who is paying attention and who comes out on top today. All right, I am now going to move things over. We are going to talk to Hannah McDonald. She's the education specialist for the National Marine Sanctuaries. Hannah, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. Here we are, Stephanie Gandulla and myself are presenting on behalf of the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries and specifically Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary today. Before we dive deeper into Thunder Bay, I want to provide you a little bit of an overview of the National Marine Sanctuary system. So we are a system of 14 national marine sanctuaries and 2 marine national monuments, which I will give you a virtual tour of here in a second. But first, I want to see if we can engage you in Slido. So we want these presentations to really involve you. We want you to feel that you can ask us any questions. But first, I want to know if you're watching this stream with other people or if you're alone. So Joe has the Slido up and running. Joe, what are we seeing? Are we seeing people alone? Are we seeing people with their families, with their friends?
All right, I do have that in. I can see people are already starting to vote. So let's take a look at some of the results that are coming in live here. There we go. All right, looks like we have some family groups joining us today. There's more votes coming in here. All right, excellent. Yeah, with groups of 4, groups of 2, a couple people alone, but it looks like a lot are joining in families today. So that's great.
That is great. And I also want to welcome many of the distance learning virtual classrooms that are tuning in across the country. We had many requests about registration on how to get students to be able to view this. So we hope that you're online and viewing this recording. All right, I have one more Slido question before I get started. I want to know if you've heard about NOAA's National Marine Sanctuaries before. This will help me as I guide you through our tour. So Joe, as people are responding, let me know what they're saying.
All right, good results so far, Hannah. We've got 92% so far say yes, they have heard of NOAA's National Marine Sanctuaries before. And I do want to take this moment just to remind everybody that posted in the chat is the link to the Slido room. Use the event code Thunder and you'll find the poll questions there. So we'd like to get lots of answers for the questions today.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. We'll go back and forth between Slido today, so it is really important that if you have the ability to open that up. To start off, I'm going to start at the most northwest corner of continental United States in Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary, where we protect lots of tidal environments all the way down to the deep sea. Going south in California, we have Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary, Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuary, Monterey Bay, Channel Islands. We're going all the way across the Pacific to Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument off of Hawaii. We have Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary, which protects the breeding grounds for humpback whales. We have the National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa, even further out in the Pacific. Bringing it a little bit back closer to continental US, we have Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary 100 miles off the coast of Texas. We have Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, which protects the Florida Keys Reef Tract. We have Grays Reef National Marine Sanctuary off the coast of Georgia. Also off the coast of North Carolina, we have Monitor National Marine Sanctuary. Now this was actually the first National Marine Sanctuary designated. Our newest National Marine Sanctuary is Mallows Bay Potomac River National Marine Sanctuary in the Potomac River in Virginia. Now, this newest National Marine Sanctuary was established in 2019 and protects the Ghost Fleet shipwrecks. We have Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary in Massachusetts Bay, Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary, which we'll find out more about today with Stephanie. And with that, that completes our tour. Have you ever visited a National Marine Sanctuary? This should also be a question on Slido.
It is up there. We've had responses coming in already. 63% of those joining us in the webinar have visited a National Marine Sanctuary.
That is great. That's exciting. So National Marine Sanctuaries are designated to protect things like sea giants, to the small sea life, protecting areas with abundant biodiversity. They're also protecting special places that protect some of the most charismatic marine species. We also protect maritime heritage, which we'll learn about today. And we're all about resource protection for future generations. This is a part of our mandate as well as education and outreach. So what we're doing today is a part of the National Marine Sanctuaries Act, and it allows us to encourage you to learn more about the National Marine Sanctuary System. These are our special marine places. There are places to paddle, fish, snorkel, surf, boat. These places are ours to recreate in. Ooh, now here is a question. I guess this is a trick question since I don't think that I explicitly mentioned it earlier, but I would want to know your guess. So how many square miles do National Marine Sanctuaries encompass? Joe,
All right.
what are people guessing?
We've got 52% are rolling the dice on 600,000 square miles.
Wow, that is the correct answer. So sanctuaries protect a little bit over 600,000 square miles of water. That's great. I guess now that's 600,000 square miles that we could snorkel, right, Stephanie?
Absolutely.
Now, do you have a snorkel mask though?
Oh, gosh, I forgot my snorkel mask, and you definitely need one to snorkel these amazing waters.
I have one here. I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Hannah.
You are welcome.
Now I'm ready.
With that, I'm going to turn over controls to Stephanie to tell us a little bit more about Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary.
Okay, getting ready to share my screen.
Awesome.
All right, I'm just going to jump in for one more second. As Stephanie shares her screen, Stephanie's going to have a few quiz questions for you to see how well you're paying attention. So I've switched things over in Slido so the quiz is activated. You just need to pop your name in. It's a timed quiz. Each question is 25 seconds, and we'll announce the top three, who came out on top, who was the quickest in paying attention.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Joe. And thank you, Hannah. I am super excited to be here with you today to share lots of great stories about the Great Lakes and their maritime history. I'm going to talk to you about the Great Lakes in general, where Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary is located. And next, we'll talk about why a sanctuary was designated here. Hannah talked about all the places in our ocean, our country's ocean landscapes and seascapes, but why a National Marine Sanctuary here in the heart of the Great Lakes? Then I'll do my favorite part and share a couple of my favorite sanctuary shipwreck stories. And then we'll talk a little bit about what maritime archaeologists do in their work here in Thunder Bay and how you can connect and learn more. So first of all, let's talk about where we are in the Great Lakes. Over 10,000 years ago, the Great Lakes were carved by glaciers and filled with water. They're a natural highway and a vital resource for our planet and have been for thousands of years. They cover 94,000 square miles and hold over 6 quadrillion gallons of water. 6 quadrillion is kind of hard to imagine. It's 6 with 15 zeros after it. If you were to spread all the water in the Great Lakes across the continental US, the water would be almost 10 feet deep. The Great Lakes has over 10,000 miles of shoreline, and over 30,000 commercial vessels have sailed the Great Lakes. And it's estimated that there are somewhere between 6,000 to 10,000 shipwrecks in all 5 of the Great Lakes. But it wasn't until 1825, with the construction of the Erie Canal, that the Atlantic Ocean, the busy Atlantic Ocean and their ports, was connected to the Great Lakes. And this canal and this connection enabled ships to travel from the busy ports like New York City to our Great Lakes ports and brought goods, materials, and people west to a growing America. For a time, the Great Lakes was the world's busiest waterway. So a busy waterway means lots and lots of ships, and lots of ships means lots of shipwrecks. There's a number of factors that contributed to the number of shipwrecks here in the Great Lakes, and particularly here in Thunder Bay. First of all, I mentioned the busy waterway, the high traffic. So any vessel traveling on the Great Lakes, as you can see where we're at, would have to pass by Thunder Bay, whether they're traveling north or south. Also, the area is known for bad weather, sudden storms, terrible fog. And finally, the area in and around Thunder Bay, highlighted here on the map, is known to be very shallow and rocky bottoms, so perfect for ships running aground and the hulls ripping apart, whether they're a wooden hull or a steel or metal hull. And as we zoom in on where we are in the Great Lakes, you can see the number of shipwrecks in our 4,300 square miles. We have identified 99, and we estimate there's at least that many more yet to be discovered. So this collection of shipwrecks represents over 100 years of shipping history and ship construction and design. We call this the shipwreck century. And in that short time period, we've seen everything from old wooden schooners like the Northwestern that you see here. This rests in about 130 feet of water, to paddle wheelers and propeller steamers like the shallow New Orleans that you see here, which was a paddle wheeler. The earliest documented shipwreck in sanctuary waters ran aground in 1849, all the way to massive steel freighters, very similar to the ships plying the Great Lakes today. But it's not just the quantity. We talked about hundreds of shipwrecks. It's not just the variety, schooners, steamers, freighters. And it's not even just the preservation, the cold, fresh water that makes Thunder Bay so special. One of the main reasons it's so special really is the accessibility. Here we have the shallow shipwreck Albany, accessible to a paddleboarder in the clear waters. I love that image. You can see the cold, clear water. And then we have the wooden schooner Portland, accessible to snorkelers. This one lies in about 8 feet of water. And then, of course, we do have the deep shipwrecks that people, technical divers from all over the world, travel here to Thunder Bay. Here we have a photo mosaic of the wooden schooner Defiance, which sank in a collision in 1854. So all sorts of reasons we have a special, significant collection of shipwrecks here in Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. So I'd like to ask you guys a question now. So what was constructed in 1825 that created a navigable waterway from the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes? We've got a few seconds there to answer.
We've got a bunch of students signed up in the quiz, bunch of viewers. The countdown is on, 25 seconds. Answers are coming in. All right, and that question is now closed. Stephanie, 89% of our viewers went with the Erie Canal.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that, because that is indeed the correct answer. They were listening. That's good to know. Erie Canal, very, very special part of our Great Lakes maritime history. So now I'd like to dive into a couple of shipwreck stories. Like I mentioned, we have hundreds to choose from. A couple of my favorites are, first one, the Monahans. And one particular tale I will tell about the Monahans happened years and years before it sank in Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. So it was actually up in Lake Superior in 1889, and the wooden freighter Monahans encounters a terrible, terrible storm. The steering gear gave way, and so it began to flounder. It lost its way. It couldn't navigate through the water in this terrible storm. And according to the Duluth Evening Herald, I quote, "A monster wave stove in the pilot house and hurled the wheelsman overboard. But the next wave swept up and threw him back aboard the vessel. He survived, and he was a little wet, but he was able to navigate for the next 48 hours and eventually led the Monahans back to safety in Marquette in Lake Superior." The Monahans put in another 18 years of service on the Great Lakes before it finally met its end about 10 miles off the shores of Alpena, right here in Thunder Bay, on the shores of Thunder Bay Island. The Monahans is one of the earliest forebears of modern Great Lakes freighters. You can see the long unobstructed decks and the wheels housed all the way forward. So it's a very typical of what we see yet today. It was built in 1872, just south of Detroit in Gibraltar, and it was carrying iron ore from Lake Superior's mining towns to Detroit. And hundreds of similar vessels like the Monahans carried the very ore and the very fuel that fueled our industrial revolution in our country. But it was another terrible storm that the Monahans met in 1907, and it was dodging the storm in the leeward side, outside of the wind, hiding from the wind and the storm by Thunder Bay Island, anchored in its middle of the night, and the lantern in the engine room on this wooden vessel that was carrying coal toppled over, and there was a terrible fire. Thankfully, there was a life-saving station on Thunder Bay Island, and the life-saving station crew rowed out in the middle of the storm and was able to rescue everyone from the Monahans. But today, here we have a site plan, one of the tools that archaeologists create to interpret shipwrecks. Today, this is one of the most accessible and most popular shipwreck sites within the sanctuary. It lies in about 17 feet of water. You can see how shallow it is here, and has a mooring buoy on it, so very accessible and one of the best sites. My next shipwreck story is the New Orleans. I mentioned it earlier, the earliest documented shipwreck within sanctuary waters. So historically, on a single day, paddle wheelers like the New Orleans could carry thousands and thousands of people, possibly up to 5,000 people from Buffalo to the Western Great Lakes. The New Orleans was sailing in 1849, and it was a beautiful June day, probably like the day we're experiencing here in northern Michigan, sunny, but a terrible fog came up. The New Orleans was attempting to go outside of Thunder Bay Island, but the fog just led it astray, and it went inside of Thunder Bay Island on the terrible shallow shoals that we mentioned and ran aground. The most interesting part of the story is the hundreds of passengers that were left stranded on Thunder Bay Island, which was at that time a fishing community. The fishermen and the fishermen's families helped the passengers, and many of them ended up staying on Thunder Bay Island for over 3 days, waiting for transport from other steamers to take them to wherever they were going, either back home or possibly to ports further west where they were emigrating. The challenge was that many of the captains would not pick up the passengers that were stranded unless they could pay. So many immigrants ended up staying there a few extra days. Eventually, everyone did get rescued. So another one of those shipwreck stories with no lives lost. There were some great images here of the New Orleans, another shallow site, very accessible. This is an aerial view taken from a little plane. And then here we have the timbers still evident today in the cold, clear water of Thunder Bay. What you're looking at there, that rounded wooden section, is where the piece that the paddle wheeler would have been encased. Lots of evidence yet to see of how these ships were built. Now I'd like to ask you another question. We've been talking a lot about this one, so I imagine you'll probably get this. What is the earliest documented shipwreck within the marine sanctuary?
All right, that quiz question is open. About 25 seconds, counting down. Remember, the quicker you answer, the more points you get. So we'll see who comes out on top shortly. Got about 10 more seconds to wrap up this quiz question. All right, Stephanie, 74% went with the New Orleans paddle wheeler.
That's great to hear, because that's the right answer. New Orleans ran aground in 1849. The Cornelia Windiad is another very famous, very deep shipwreck site within the Marine Sanctuary. That sank in 1875. And you might know that the Edmund Fitzgerald actually sank in Lake Superior in 1975. So now we've learned about these shipwreck stories. We've learned about the rich maritime history here in the Great Lakes. But why? Why are shipwrecks important? Why do we spend our time studying them? Shipwrecks offer a time capsule of history, if you will, a snapshot of what life was like at the time of their sinking, something that you generally can't find anywhere else. It provides insight in the daily lives of people like you and like me, people who aren't often talked about in the history books. However, these shipwreck sites are fragile and non-renewable. In fact, many of these sites are the only example of a particular type left. So clearly they're important to understand the people of our past, and they also help create value and really connect us to protect our waterways for so many of the other important reasons. So it's important what archaeologists do. I hope I've shown that, but how do they do it? Well, first of all, we start with the research. There's documents, there's ship records, enrollment, like you register your car, you'd register a ship. So lots and lots of rich historical records, journals, like I said, newspaper reports. In fact, right in downtown Alpena, the Alpena County George M. Fletcher Library holds the Thunder Bay Sanctuary Research Collection, which holds the records of over 80,000 ships. That's accessible online as well. So once we gather our research, then it's time to get out there and look for the shipwrecks, to search and to survey the bottomlands for these wrecks. You can do that a number of different ways. On the left, you see an image of an airplane going out with the cold and clear freshwater of Lake Huron. It's sometimes possible to see shallow wrecks from a plane. We also engage in a lot of remote sensing survey, and the image on the right depicts that, where we'll go out and send out sound waves to the bottom of the lake so we can really see what the lake bottom looks like and look for more shipwrecks. There's many other ways to search for shipwrecks, such as underwater robots. Once we find these shipwrecks, then it's time to document them. Earlier in my presentation, I showed you a site map. That's something that is created from measurements that archaeologists and students create. On the left, we see our very own Hannah McDonald documenting a shipwreck that's on the beach. And then on the right is another typical way that we would measure these shipwrecks and document them. And so an archaeologist's documentation really becomes important interpretive tools, which leads us to the final step, really, and I would say probably the most important job and responsibility of an underwater archaeologist, and that's to communicate these stories and to share the outreach. One of the ways you can hear these shipwreck stories and really connect to the Great Lakes and their rich maritime history is the Sanctuary's Visitor Center, which is pictured on the left. That's a free maritime museum in the heart of Alpena, open year-round, hopefully opening up again here pretty soon. And also go out and connect with these shipwrecks firsthand, whether you're snorkeling or paddling, like I've shown in some pictures, scuba diving, and of course, but also on a glass bottom boat, as you see pictured here, visiting the shipwreck Monahanset. Thunder Bay works hard to protect these shipwrecks, and we work with the community and with students to do that as well. So the goal, of course, is to make them accessible to you. We've been talking about snorkeling throughout. I'm ready to go snorkeling, as you see my nephew here enjoying his time on a shallow shipwreck site. So I will end with an invitation to you all to, whether you're nearby or far away, to make plans to visit Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary when we open up, hopefully in person. But in the meantime, Hannah will share lots of virtual means to visit Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary and experience our rich maritime history.
Indeed, that's sanctuaries.noaa.gov/VR. There is an entire virtual dive gallery of not only just Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary and their shipwrecks, but a number of other sanctuary sites, including our first virtual reality video. So that's sanctuaries.noaa.gov/VR. I'll also drop it in the chat as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Joe, to facilitate the question and answer.
All right, excellent. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. It makes a great lake diver like myself itching to get out there, so hopefully soon. We are going to take some questions now. We've got a great group joining us in today's live event. So you can use the question bar to send us in some questions, and I'm going to keep an eye on that. We'll grab some questions. You can also use that Slido room. If you were in there doing the quiz or any of the live polls, there is a Q&A part there. I'm going to take a look at both of those and grab some questions. So speaking of that quiz, Maggie came out on top, 2 out of 2 in 6 seconds flat. We had a 3-way tie for second with Beth, Rhiannon, and Elma at 8 seconds. And then we had Robin Craig in 3rd place with 9 seconds. So good job, everybody. Good paying attention. And thanks for playing along with us. So Stephanie, our first question, I really like this one. So we know zebra mussels are invasive species in the Great Lakes, and whenever they get on a surface, they coat that surface. So RG is wondering why they don't see any zebra mussels in the pictures of those wrecks.
That's a great question. I think most of the shipwrecks now that we visit and that we've documented actually do have mussels. It's become the more sturdy quagga mussel actually now. And if they weren't evident in the pictures, it may be either because those were taken before they were fully coated, or you just can't quite see them yet. But you're absolutely right, RG, that invasive mussels are a problem for the entire ecosystem and also for the shipwrecks.
All right. Yes, I do diving in Lake Huron on the Canadian side, and one of my favorites is the Wexford, and it has quite a nice coating of zebra mosses on it. Kind of hard to see what's underneath sometimes. All right, we've got another really good question here from Haley. Haley is wondering, on average, how many shipwrecks are discovered each year in the National Marine Sanctuary?
Well, you know, that's a great question.
That's a great question for our upcoming webinar too.
That's right. That's right. Tune in next week and we'll be talking all about the exploration for shipwrecks. Our most recent discoveries were in 2017. We've got a great website and interpretation about those two shipwrecks, the Ohio and the Choctaw. Very deep wrecks. People have been searching for those for many years. So it's not very often, but what surprises people is that we are still discovering shipwrecks. Before that was the great story of Project Ship Hunt in 2011, when a group of high school students out of Saginaw, Michigan, went and discovered not just one shipwreck, but two shipwrecks, the Merrick and the Etruria, two more deep shipwrecks. So we are still discovering them. I can't say dozens every year. I wish that would be so fun, but we are definitely out there looking and discovering shipwrecks.
All right, I'm going to grab a question here from the Slido room. This is from Miles at Nescoin Valley School, and he's curious. So he's asking about treasure in the shipwrecks. I might sub out that word for artifacts. Do you find many artifacts in the shipwrecks?
So, you know, when people ask the question and they include the word treasure, I always like to say the treasure is truly the history, right? These shipwrecks themselves are the treasure. You might be, when you said treasure, you might be thinking of silver and gold. Really no silver and gold on these wrecks, but the treasure really is in the stories. A lot of the artifacts, those smaller transportable artifacts, have already unfortunately been removed, whether it was by a rare permitted salvage or possibly from divers, you know, decades ago that didn't realize you really should leave these artifacts at the site to maintain the integrity of an archaeological site. But if you're interested in seeing these artifacts, a great place to go is the Sanctuary Visitor Center, where we have literally thousands, I think over 3,000 shipwreck artifacts, ranging from small daily items and spoons and things that you would use every day, up to huge ship's wheels and huge ship timbers.
All right. Robin's tuning in and wondering about the deepest wreck in the sanctuary.
Okay, so got some good questions here. So the Lake Huron itself, the maximum depth is about 750 feet. And the deepest shipwrecks that I know about personally, don't quote me on this, are about 300 feet deep, the ones that we've identified. I definitely think our team here definitely thinks that there are shipwrecks out there deeper. There has to be. So we very well might find them at the deepest points in the Great Lakes. But right now, about 300 feet in Lake Huron, in the sanctuary waters. Cool thing about that is there are lots of divers out there who are technically trained, who travel from all over the world to this world-class diving destination, because those deep shipwrecks are so well preserved. But I'm sure there's deeper ones out there that we'll find.
Are there other ways to get to shipwrecks that are that deep? I know there's lots of students tuning in, so maybe now is a great time to talk about MATE and the ROV competition.
Oh, excellent. Yes, so it does. We talked about the technical divers, and it's definitely doable, but it takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of time to get down there, and just imagine the gear you have to put on, the tanks you have to carry. But then think about if you have an underwater robot, a remotely operated vehicle or ROV, throw that in the water. And if you have 500 feet of tether, it's a much more manageable way to get down and see those shipwrecks. We work with a number of students every year who build their own underwater robots and to explore the Great Lakes. So ROVs are probably, I'd say, that one of the tops. There's submersibles too. You know, I haven't yet been able to find a way to get into a submarine, but I see that that's our future as well. Underwater robots, submarines, get down and see those shipwrecks.
All right, we've got another really good question that came in via the Slido chat. And this one is asking about the ship. So Obviously, a lot of the ships were probably doing trade around North America, but are there any shipwrecks maybe from a farther destination like Europe or Africa? Any ships from those spots?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have a number of ocean-going vessels that we've identified in the Marine Sanctuary. A great place to learn about those is our website, thunderbay.noaa.gov. So if you just remember that there's hundreds of vessels still working the Great Lakes. I like to say that, you know, I mentioned early on in my presentation that the Great Lakes were a very busy waterway. They still are a busy waterway. It's just that what one huge ocean-going vessel could haul today maybe took 200 schooners or you know 100 steamers to haul during the shipwreck century. So there's lots of foreign flag vessels working in the Great Lakes, and there were historically as well. So I can't quite remember off the top of my head some of the ocean-going vessels. You caught me there, but I do know that they're at thunderbay.noaa.gov, and I'm going to memorize those for my next presentation.
All right, fair enough. So Sharon has a question for you, and this is a good one because we've obviously talked about the archaeology, the maritime history, but what about fish species? What kind of fish species could you maybe see if you were diving or snorkeling on some of these wrecks?
Great question. So there are, I think the number is about 180 fish species in the Great Lakes, which is super impressive. And fishing is huge here in the Great Lakes. In sanctuary waters, it's totally open to fishing. Spear fishing is actually growing in popularity. So as an archaeologist, I'm not an expert on the different fish species. However, I will say that I have seen one of my favorite fish species, the burbot. I don't know if you've heard of burbot, but they're a really cool looking freshwater cod. They like to hang out in deep, cold water. They look really funky. They look like a big, slinky, fat eel. They move sort of slow. Fishermen love them for their tasty white flesh. They call them the poor man's lobster. I have been fortunate enough to eat them one time, but I see them often on the deeper shipwrecks. So you can definitely see burbot. You see smallmouth bass, you see walleye, you see lake trout, lots of invasive gobies are little tiny fish that you'll see. So you might think about, you know, and comparing it to the Caribbean waters where there's lots of life. There definitely is lots of life here in the Great Lakes. It just looks a little different.
All right. Let's see. We've got another good question here. This one is, no, I just lost it. Let's try and find that again. Oh, there it is. So this one's from the Vic family. The Vic family is tuning in, and they're wondering about the shipwrecks in the sanctuary. Are they mostly wooden shipwrecks, or is there a variety?
Ah, great question. There's definitely a variety. If I were to say mostly, we have a lot of wooden vessels, those old wooden schooners. What's really cool about the Great Lakes and studying the shipwrecks here is some of the vessels are a combination of materials. And some of my favorite wrecks really show and demonstrate the transition from wood to metal, whether it's iron or steel. As people were adapting and technology was changing, you wouldn't just go 100% wood to 100% metal. There was you know, ship construction and wooden vessels that were made longer because of reinforcements from metal, which is, you can see that very clearly in one of my favorite wrecks, the William P. Rend, which the Glass Bottom Boat visits all the time. It's huge, almost 300-foot long wooden freighter, and you can see down into the inner hull, and you can see where the metal crosses were there to reinforce that wooden hull. So we have both.
Okay, so Michael would like to know about the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Is there a center? And if so, what's available there that people can visit?
Yes, one of the coolest parts about my job is my office is at the sanctuary headquarters, which is where the visitor center is. So if I'm tired of looking at my computer screen, working on a report, I can just walk outside my office and into 10,000 square feet of maritime exhibits. This is the Great Lakes Maritime Heritage Center right on the Thunder Bay River in beautiful downtown Alpena, free and open year round. So even in the dead of winter, you can come and learn about shipwrecks. So many different activities we do. We do regular programming throughout the year. That's where the glass bottom boat departs from. We'll do field trips. We'll do education programs where you can build an ROV. We have an awesome film festival in January. So pretty much I could go on and on about the activities you can do there. I like to say there's always something happening at the Sanctuary Visitor Center.
And
All right.
don't forget to mention, just across the boardwalk from the visitor center is the glass bottom boat, one of the best ways to get into the sanctuary without having to get wet.
That's right.
All right, fair enough. Sounds like good fun to be had at the center as well as the glass bottom boat. Gina's got a great question. Gina's wondering, how did this marine sanctuary come to be? Was there a certain group that pushed for it, whether it was archaeologists, divers, environmentalists?
Oh, great question. So the history of how Thunder Bay, the 13th National Marine Sanctuary designated in the system, how it came to be is actually a fascinating one. It was designated in the year 2000, but a couple of decades really before that, there had already been a very rich respect for the history. In fact, the state of Michigan was very forward thinking in their protection of this history, and created in the late 80s, the state created the underwater preserve system. So before the National Marine Sanctuary System came here, there was the Thunder Bay Underwater Preserve. So, and that was really rich, made up of a lot of divers, I believe. But what was cool about the story with the sanctuary designation is folks weren't really sure at the start. They weren't really sure they wanted additional people, additional agencies in Thunder Bay, in Alpena, telling them what to do with their resources that they felt they had taken care of just fine. And things, became designated, and it took a very short time for people, environmentalists, fishermen, sailors, divers, teachers, the whole community to come together to really be happy that the sanctuary was here, and so happy that they wanted it to expand. And so that grassroots effort of expansion happened in 2014. So 14 years after designation, went from 448 square miles to 4,300 square miles. So that was a long way of answering the question, that it's what we've seen here is really people from all walks of life, people from all fields really value the sanctuary.
And now Alpena's slogan to say is Sanctuary of the Great Lakes. So the community has really come to support the sanctuary as a whole and embodied it in the town.
We even have Shipwreck soda.
All right, Miko is wondering about the last, say, modern shipwreck, because obviously we know we can predict the weather better. We have the lake mapped better. So when was kind of the last maybe big modern shipwreck in the area?
Great question. I'm glad you asked that. I had an image of this shipwreck in the presentation. The most recent large shipwreck was 1966. The German freighter Nordmeer ran aground, not in a storm. It actually ran aground due to a navigation error, and no lives lost on that one because it had run aground. In fact, some of the crew stayed on the ship in the hopes of refloating it before the winter. That didn't happen. They got cold and they're like, get me off of this thing before winter hits here in the Great Lakes. And for decades, the Nordmeer was still sticking up out of the water. Today, it has sunk down. It's about 2 feet below the surface of the water in about 30 feet of water. One of the coolest shallow dive sites because it's so massive. Like I said, almost 500 feet long, big steel wreck. And so that's a great snorkel site, a great fishing site, also a great scuba diving site.
All right, and Stephanie, I think we can squeeze one more question in here. This question is all the way from Australia. We have Lucky joining us, and they are wondering about the main challenges or threats that the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary faces.
Oh, goodness gracious, that's another hard one. The main threats that the sanctuary faces, let me think. I would say that although we are about shipwrecks, that's our focus, that's our hook, if you will, to get people engaged. There are so many other special things about the area here, the natural resources. And so we do partner with a lot of agencies that their main concern is water quality or invasive species. And so I would say our main challenge, and we do a pretty good job, could do better at meeting this, is to really connect people to Lake Huron, to the water, to their water, so that they make, you know, actions that protect it. So protecting the Great Lakes is truly our goal, whether it's through shipwrecks. I guess that's where we start, through the shipwrecks.
All right, excellent. Well, Hannah, I'm going to throw things over to you now. I know you have a little bit to share to wrap us up for today, but Stephanie, let me say, it was a great presentation, great fun in the Slido with all the groups that joined in, and so many good questions today.
Oh, thank you, Joe, for having me on Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, one of my favorite platforms. I'm looking forward to seeing all your programs coming up. Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, thank you both, Stephanie and Joe. I just have a little bit of housekeeping to wrap us up. So this live interaction is being recorded and will be hosted on Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants YouTube channel. So it'll take a few days to get the download up over to Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, but as soon as it is, you will be able to re-watch it again. We also have plenty of upcoming live interactions. We have them for students, like the one you're watching right now. We also have a distance learning webinar series for educators. We have Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. I really want to plug that they have incredible presenters on nearly every single day for you to tune in and bring into your at-home environment. And then NOAA Ocean Today is also doing a deeper dive into ocean exploration webinar series. So plenty of places to connect with exploration, to connect with the ocean, and really continue learning throughout these times. The upcoming programs that we're running with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, our next one is May 7th, which is this Thursday, and we'll be exploring the depths of Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Chad King, the research specialist there, will be joining us. And I know that we talked a little bit about submersibles on this program. Chad actually has been down in a submersible, so maybe if you tune in then, you can ask him about his experience there. On the 8th, which is this Friday, we are exploring the sounds of Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary. So you can learn about some of the noises underwater in Gray's Reef on Friday. And then we're coming all the way back to Thunder Bay on May 12th with Stephanie again. She's going to talk to us about the exploration that was happening in 2019. Actually, I believe it started exactly 1 year ago in Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary with an autonomous surface vehicle, Ben. Super exciting. People were even asking questions in the questions box about this specific expedition, Stephanie. So I think we'll have some returning viewers. And then I just wanted to let you know that following this webinar, as soon as we are done, you'll be prompted to take a survey. This is an evaluation survey of the programs that we're providing, and your input is greatly appreciated. We also take into account your feedback and apply it to future programs. So if there's a topic that you think we should definitely discuss, please let us know and we will consider it moving forward. So that is all that I have today. I really want to thank Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants for hosting us, and Stephanie for being such a wonderful presenter and letting us know all about Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And thank you to all of the viewers who are engaged on Slido and engaged in the GoToWebinar platform. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you again soon. This concludes today's webinar.
Okay, I guess we're done, Stephanie.
Okay, do I just sign off?
I think so, yep.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
All right, it was good to see you, and I guess we have another one coming up.
Yes, okay, we'll see you soon.
All right.